We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Reverend Katie Sexton Wood. I am the Executive Director of Arizona Faith Network, and it is such an honor to be with all of you tonight to talk about this really important subject. We are lucky in here in Arizona to have so many expert advocacy folks guide us through how to advocate for the things our faith tradition teaches us to care about. And tonight, we are joined by numerous partners to host this event. I'm going to name a few that I do not believe could be here tonight, as Reverend Dr. Bill Lyons, who is the conference minister of the Southwest United Church of Christ, signed on as a co-sponsor of this event. So welcome to all our United Church of Christ friends. My other boss, the Reverend Jay Hartley, who is the regional minister and president of the Christian Church in Arizona, also signed on. So hello to my fellow ministers in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. We have a few more hosts with us this evening, so I want to introduce them and give them just a moment to tell us who they are, who their organization is, and why they felt it was important to be here tonight. First person I'm going to turn it over to is Alicia Contreras with Corazon.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Katie. So glad to be in this virtual space in 2022 with you all. It's been a moment so that I'm able to be with you. Once again, I am Alicia Contreras. I'm the executive director of Corazon, Arizona. We are a federation of faith in action, and Corazon is a community of diverse faith traditions, beliefs, schools, and Arizonans so that are working towards a place where we can live with abundancy and dignity for all. I'm humbled and honored to be with you all on this powerful efforts as we think about our sacred act of voting and work in partnership with one another across multiracial, multi-ethnic, and multi-generational Arizonans that call Arizona home. So looking forward to this conversation. And Corazon, we really spend time focusing on economic dignity, immigrant justice, and our current reality around COVID relief and civic engagement as a part of that advocacy work and the vehicle to do so. So we're looking forward to this conversation and the year to come.
Thank you, Alicia. Corazon is such an amazing organization and partner with Arizona Faith Network and our community at large. Our next co-host for tonight is Mr. Paul Rockbauer, who is the executive director of the Jewish Community Relations Council of Greater Phoenix. Paul.
Well, thank you. I'm going to make this very brief. Here on behalf of the Jewish community, we do advocacy, interfaith outreach, and community bridge building on behalf of the Jewish community. And I would say that it's a Jewish value to fight for democracy in this country. And I'm going to end my quick remarks by paraphrasing Mahatma Gandhi, who said, this is fighting for democracy, or to paraphrase it, fighting for democracy is the first article of my faith. It's the last article of my creed. So glad to be here tonight with Alex and All Voting is Local, who's a tremendous partner in the fight for democracy, and glad to see so many faith partners here.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Our final partner that's on with us tonight, at least that I've seen, is Vicki Finger, who is with the Religious Society of Friends in Flagstaff. You know them as the Quakers. So Vicki, please introduce yourself.
Yes, we are here, and I'm representing the Religious Society of Friends or Quakers in Arizona. I'm actually in Flagstaff. We believe that we are going to need to work together if we are going to protect our beliefs and our communities. So we are happy to be here and working together in spirit-led action.
Thank you so much, Vicki. To our co-hosts and partners, we'll leave you up here if you would like as panelists, and you can definitely turn your videos off if you want during the presentation. Just a note to help guide everyone as we join together tonight, we do have live translation happening by the wonderful Shuvru Vasu Bandhu, who is Arizona Faith Network's faith community coordinator. And so if you need to see this in Spanish, please click on interpretation, and you can actually select how you would like to experience tonight as well. He is typing in closed caption, I believe. And so we will be recording this so you can share beyond here too. One other thing to get us settled is if you have questions through the night, please use the Q&A feature. We will either be answering them as we go, perhaps in that little chat box, or holding them for the end. We're going to be handing the microphone over in just a second to All Voting is Local. They're going to give a presentation and walk us through just what is going on in Arizona. We ask that a lot sometimes here around policy and advocacy issues. And then we'll have some good time for more of a relaxed, informal conversation with everyone at the conclusion of their presentation. But please lift your questions as we go, or write them down so you don't forget to ask them. No question is a bad question. If you are thinking it, somebody else is probably thinking it as well. So make sure to ask the experts tonight. We wanna make them work a little bit. And with that, I'm gonna introduce All Voting is Local, who is just such a wonderful organization here in Arizona. They are a great partner of AFN. I think this is the second webinar we've done together, Alex, over the last couple of years. And so I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, Alex, to introduce yourself and your team. Thank you.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me all right? Yeah, all right, great. I was having some technical difficulties. I think I resolved, fingers crossed. If not, with me tonight are Amanda and Laura. Do you want to introduce yourselves, Amanda and Laura?
Good evening. My name is Amanda Lugo. My pronouns are she, her, aya, and I am the Arizona Grassroots Program Manager with All Voting is Local. Laura?
Hi, my name is Laura Tarek, she, her pronouns, and I am the Elections Advocacy Organizer with All Voting is Local. Happy to be here tonight.
And I'm Alex. I'm the Arizona State Director for All Voting is Local. And we have a presentation tonight. It has a lot of information. And before we started, I wanted to sort of like set the frame. And that is like, we're not in a good place as regards democracy in our country, right? There's a faction, they're a noisy faction, and they exercise power because we let them exercise power, who believe in authoritarianism over freedom. People who believe in lies and conspiracy theories over facts and data. People who believe in political power and greed over justice and fairness. And we have to just acknowledge that that's happening, right? That's the context at which we come to this. And this faction is targeting communities, particularly communities of color. And they're really doing two things. They're making it harder to vote, first and foremost, and then even more troubling, they're trying to undermine our ability to use elections to elect leaders, using raw political to basically to stack the results. And we saw that here in Arizona with the Sham election review. We're not powerless. There's a lot we can do. We can stop bad bills, right? That's one of the things we're going to talk about. And we were pretty successful last session doing that. If bills get passed, they have to be implemented, and there's a whole host of ways we can help make sure that those are implemented well. We can engage in election protection. We can push our senators to support federal legislation and try and get the federal government team. And there are a variety of other actions we can take and help turn out the vote to basically be successful and to protect what we treasure in our democracy. But there's no way about it. Like there's a serious challenge to our basic norms, and we really need to be organized together. We do this work year round. We're doing, November people is a long way away. We're talking about it now because we need to talk about it now. November's tomorrow to voting rights advocates, given the context that we're living in 2020. So we have a presentation. We're going to talk about the legislature. We're going to talk about last session and this session, but we really then want to have a conversation about what we can do. But we need to be hopeful and powerful and forceful and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure the system is accountable to the people. Amanda, you want to start us off?
Yes, thank you so much for joining us this evening. As I said earlier, my name is Amanda Lugo, and I'm the Arizona Grassroots Program Manager with All Voting is Local. Again, thank you for your time and for joining us. All Voting is Local is an organization that fights to remove discriminatory barriers to voting before the next election, empowering communities of color, young people, low-income Americans, and voters with disabilities so that all our voices are heard. We use data-driven advocacy tactics and strategic communications to build powerful relationships between constituents, grassroots organizations, legal resources, elected officials, tribal nations, and research organizations. Our priorities are to remove barriers to the ballot, increase voting for all eligible voters, ensure fair rules for registering to vote and casting a ballot, and to support efforts to restore federal protections for the right to vote. This evening, we're going to be talking about attacks on voting rights that happened during the 2021 legislative session, what's coming up in the 2022 legislative session, and then ways that we can take action to not only protect the right to vote, but expand voting access as well. So we'll be starting with a review of what happened in 2021. We saw impeding election administration attacks, such as the criminalization of elections officials. Examples like this were House Bill 2792, which would have made it a Class 5 felony for elections officials to send a ballot to a voter who did not officially request it, either by being on the permanent early voting list or by a one-time special request. It was passed, but was later vetoed by Governor Ducey. Measures like this would disproportionately affect disabled voters, rural voters, Native voters, and jail voting. We also saw technical bills that would have damaged election administration, such as House Bill 2569, which would have interfered and it banned additional funds for voting. So state, city, town, counties, school districts, and other public bodies that conduct or administer elections would not receive or expend private money for preparing, administering, or conducting an election, including voter education, outreach, voter registration, and other voting related expenses, such as additional drop boxes, cleaning supplies, rent for polling places, temporary staff, and personal protective equipment, which are all necessary to vote during a pandemic. It would have placed undue financial burden on counties, particularly in rural communities, without replacing that funding. We also saw a restriction of power for the Secretary of State. An example of this would have been SB 1819, which was sponsored by Senate President Karen Fann, which would have given the Attorney General the sole authority to speak for the state in court in defense of the Arizona election laws and procedures. It would have prohibited the Secretary of State from hiring outside attorneys. It was a ballot provision, but was later struck down by the Arizona Supreme Court.
There were also a number of bills that just that limited who could stay on the rolls, who would be on the permanent early voting list, and who would be on the rolls. So on the permanent early voting list, this bill passed, became law, and unless we repeal it, it permanently changes what was our permanent early voting list. We now have an active early voting list, not a permanent early voting list. And basically, if you don't return one of the ballots in 2 cycles, you no longer will get a ballot by mail. You'll be removed from the permanent early voting list, One of the things about this bill, it's not well thought out. It's confusing. It doesn't actually basically say inactive people, people who don't vote. So first of all, it's bad policy to kick people off the rolls just because they don't vote. The better practice is to figure out a way to engage them so that they do vote. But second, even if we're going to say at some point in time we're going to kick people off the rolls because they don't vote, that's not true with this new bill that was passed, because you can vote in person and it will still eject you from the permanent early voting list. There are many voters that get a ballot by mail, sit down with family, look at it, mark it up, and then go into a polls and cast another ballot. All of those people who vote in that way will be kicked off the permanent early voting list. They'll no longer get the tool that they use to sit down with their family and figure out, how do I want to cast my ballot? What do I know about these candidates? What do I know about these judges? What about these referenda? Complicated. And it really prevents us from having educated citizenship, is in many ways what this bill does. The other, from the official rolls, this was a part of the budget. This was a bill. It's a bad idea. It couldn't be passed in regular order. They crammed it in the budget at the last minute. That basically allows the Senate or the House to designate a private company, and that company basically gets to purge the rolls. They dictate to election officials who should be on the rolls. That's the way this bill was written. That's the way it was cast. That's the way it couldn't pass in regular order. And that's the way it was crammed through in the budget bill. And but for the fact that the state Supreme Court struck down the budget bill based on the single subject rule, that would be the law in Arizona going forward. Horrible, horrible policy. It's already been pre-filed. It's already back. We're already going to be fighting against it again this session. Laura?
So we're also seeing a lot of different varied attacks on making it harder to vote by mail. And the first one of those is voter ID laws. So this one did fail last session. We expect it to be back in some form or another this session. Because the reasons that it failed last session were sort of technicalities on operationalizing this bill. What it would have done would require voters to put both their date of birth and their driver's license number or the last 4 digits of their social security on their ballot. That's a huge privacy concern. That's just a lot of information to have in one place. And then it's also bringing up questions like if you have to provide, some sort of copy of your driver's license, that's a burden on working families, right? Who may not have access to a printer or a scanner. They're maybe having to go somewhere and get that done. Or if you don't have a driver's license, then it gets into, what other forms of count and how easily can you access those? So just a lot of questions with this bill. And again, it's important to remember that those voter ID laws, those are verified on the back end initially when you sign up to register to vote. We're also seeing the in-person requirement, which would send you an early ballot, but then require you to turn it in person. Now, vote by mail is really, really popular in Arizona. More than 80% of our state votes by mail. So all of these attacks to make it harder to vote by mail would absolutely have a big impact on how our state votes and the freedom that we have to choose how we vote. And then finally, we saw an alarming number of measures proposed that would have eliminated early voting altogether, eliminated the permanent early voting list, repeal it, ban it. And it wasn't just one bill. That's what's kind of shocking to note, is that there were 5, 6, 7 bills that all went after this same issue of just pulling away the permanent early voting list altogether. We expect to see some of these back next session as well.
We also saw attempts to overturn election results. Bills like 2720, 2826, and 1006 did not pass, but we must remain vigilant. They would have given the legislator the power to overturn the results of the election, undermining the decision of the voters with partisan attacks. As far as decertification, the legislator would have had the power to decertify the results of the presidential election. We also saw attempts to change the certification procedures, making the legislator giving the legislator power to certify the results of the election as opposed to the Secretary of State, which again was another an attempt to attack Secretary of State Hobbs during her term.
So then there's the sham election review, and that's, I guess the next slide is probably best. You can click the first box if you would, thanks. So the sham election review was just that, right? It was a highly partisan attempt to basically, for a losing campaign, to basically attempt to relitigate the election. The concept of this sham election review, it wasn't just an event. These are now happening in several other states. It's happening in Michigan. It's happening at some level in Pennsylvania. There's discussions about this in Florida. So it's not just like an event. It's not just an Arizona thing. It's a new strategy by losing campaigns to basically undermine the sanctity, if you will, of our elections, to question whether or not, if you don't like the result that you get from the people, to basically do everything you can to try and undermine that and set that aside. We saw here in Arizona, this is it is part of this national concerted effort. If you could do the next box, please, and the one after. And it really is targeted at communities of color. If you look at where these election reviews are happening, if you look at in the states where they're happening, the jurisdictions they're being focused on, you say like, oh no, this is happening in Milwaukee, or this is happening in Wisconsin, but it's actually happening in Milwaukee, or this is happening in Michigan, happening in Detroit, and it's really Detroit that we want to look at. We only looked at the presidential election in Maricopa County in Arizona when we did our sham election review. Didn't look at any of those down ballot races that maybe were surprises to some people. We just looked at one race in money, and it really is targeted at, and it's being pushed by people who are trying to undermine the historic turnout in communities of color. Next box, please, Laura. It's sometimes difficult to determine what was happening in Arizona with the sham election review, but there were some real heroes, right? American Oversight is a national group that did a bunch of public records requests. The Arizona Republic, and just the sort of the journalism, the investigative journalism that occurred in Arizona to basically raise questions about why is this happening? Who's pushing it? Who's communicating with whom? Is this really about a losing political campaign communicating with people of their same party, or is it a valid undertaking? And it was quite clear that what happened in Arizona was a partisan political action on the part of a losing campaign that could not use any of the normal courses for challenging the fact that they lost an election to try and continue to litigate that election. And that's really what happened with this review. And the fact that this is trying to be done in other areas is of real concern. Next, please. They're also springing up. We have one started a year and a half, 2 years ago in Arizona, but these election integrity units. Now we're criminalizing election officials. Now we're empowering other law enforcement agencies to investigate voters, to intimidate voters, to try and chill participation in elections. It's the exact same way that, in general, it's a bad practice to have police officers stationed at polling places. Because guess what? There are some people who have a right to vote who maybe don't want to interact with police officers every day. And I know sometimes for some people that's hard to understand, but for low-income communities and communities of color, it's in most places a majority opinion. okay? And so these election integrity units, this criminalization of the voting process, this is truly designed and intended to intimidate, and will have the impact of, and will have the effect of intimidating voters if we allow it to continue to grow and to metastasize, because it's a cancer. Next, please. We really need to look on focusing on like reduction of harm from these sham election reviews. We need to educate voters. It's safe to vote. It's, you know, you're not at risk voting. There were a lot of like physical intimidation at the polls in 2020, not as much as we were worried about, but it continues to be an issue that we need to be concerned about. Our election protection team had de-escalation teams to deploy out at polling places to make sure that if there were people who were making people feel unsafe, there were more people there to make those people feel safe again. And we deployed a number of de-escalation teams in our election protection this past cycle. And I think the concern is that in 2022 and 2024, we're going to need to do more of that, because the people who are losing and can't win by valid means are getting desperate, and they're engaging in, you know, these really egregious tactics.
So as Alex mentioned, we will have a lot to watch out for this year. Oftentimes these bills, when they fail, they're generally not dead. They get sort of reworked over the summer, and they come back again with new caveats, new sponsors occasionally. So there will be a lot to watch out for. So let's dive into that. So we're going to see more damage to the vote by mail and the early voting list. That will be a pet project, certainly of particular lawmakers as they work to aggressively attack our mail-in voting system. We're going to continue to see voter roll purges, especially the type that Alex mentioned, where it's being farmed out to a private, third company who's then dictating who stays on the voter rolls and who does not. We'll see further attacks on citizen initiatives. This is a very interesting one, where ballot measures that are proposed by citizens and collect signatures and things like that, there's a lot of effort to make that harder by doing things like ensuring that you have to read aloud the entire text of the proposition before anyone can sign it, things like that, just to make it harder for citizens to make their voices heard at the polls and on the ballot. We'll see further criminalization of elections officials. And then, for all of the things we can predict, there are many things that we can't. There will absolutely be very new and creative ways to sabotage this election. We are going to have some democratic elements. Democracy is on the ballot in 2022. So these are some of the ballot initiatives that we will be voting on that we'll see on our ballot in November. So the first is SCR 1034. That weakens the Voter Protection Act by letting lawmakers amend voter-approved measures by a simple majority if a court says that they're illegal or unconstitutional. So if any sort of part of that measure was decreed unconstitutional, the legislature would then be able to throw out the entire measure. HCR 2001 also limits ballot initiatives to a single subject. Now, if this goes through, it would void things like, well, it wouldn't retroactively, but it would have voided things like the minimum wage increase, and it would just make it really, really difficult to run citizen initiatives in the future, since by nature, some of these topics are multi-layered, complex. It can be difficult to stick to a single subject, especially when we're dealing with some of these bigger issues. And then finally, SB 1828, this was the flat tax. So this reduces state revenue by giving a $1.9 billion annual tax cut to the wealthiest in Arizona. And again, this is permanent. It's possible to kind of walk this back, but it would require a 2/3 vote of the legislature. And that's not realistic at this point in the future. So if this passes, this will become a permanent tax cut, reducing quite a bit of revenue for our state. So this will be something to vote on come November.
All right, and hopefully there'll be some positive, there may also be some positive initiatives. There may be a fair elections initiative that would take some of the provisions that are in the federal bills, automatic voter registration, same day voter registration, money out of politics, some of the other things that were in the original For the People Act and in the Freedom to Vote Act, and put those in an initiative form on the ballot in November if the signatures can be collected. So we need everyone to take action. We need you to take action tonight. But we need you to think about, to look at 2022 as the year you're going to commit to democracy, and you're going to spend time with your family, with your friends, with your congregations, with people in your communities, with people who don't have access to all the information, helping get people up to speed, why it's important to participate. Even though midterms don't have that many interesting things on the ballot, democracy is really literally on the ballot in 2022, and we need to help people understand that and see that. And then the ballot will be complex. If there are 5 or 6 or 7 initiative and referenda on the ballot, we're going to need to be able to help people understand, here's what this does and here's why it's good or bad. And that's going to take all of us chipping in with our communities and making sure people understand. Next, please, Laura. So here are the things we have that you can do. And I'm sorry, I'm managing 2 broken machines here, and I will get my act together. The first is, we'll have the URL on the next page, but we've put together a democracy pledge, and the democracy pledge, democracypledgeaz.com. It's simple. It's basically has 6 different premises that basically say, there shouldn't be unreasonable barriers to register to vote. You should have access to the ballot in person or by mail, however you need it. And they're pretty basic, they're pretty simple. They're all supported by current and existing law in Arizona, and every person should be able to sign on to them. They basically just say, we're going to follow the law in our elections. We're going to be fair about our elections. And we're asking people to sign the democracy pledge. We have partners that are asking politicians to sign the democracy pledge and candidates to sign the democracy pledge. And we're pushing to make sure that everyone is paying attention to democracy this year. And that's one of the tools. The second is session activations. Like the session will be starting, whatever. We had the state of the state. Committees are going to start to meet, and very quickly these bills are going to be coming up. We're going to be monitoring them closely. We're fighting hard to make sure that there are some no votes against these bills to try and prevent them from moving forward. But that's not going to happen automatically. It always happens because citizens stand up and speak out and tell their elected representatives no. And by being engaged, you can help us take action, and you can ask your elected officials and or committee people when it gets into committee to basically stop these bills, because they're bad bills. And one of the beautiful things about the Democracy Pledge site is that when you sign the Democracy Pledge, it's going to roll you over to a Get Involved page, which is a sub-page on the Democracy Pledge site. And during the session, we're going to have all the active activations that are going on. If you go there now, there's one that says, ask your representatives to sign this Democracy Pledge. That's one of them. But there's a second one that's there right now that says, ask the legislative leadership to allow remote testimony. I don't know if you've heard in the news, but apparently some people at the Capitol, the people in charge, think that COVID ended, that there aren't any health concerns, there aren't masking requirements, there's no social distancing happening, and the leadership has said they're not going to allow remote testimony. Last session, we could all testify like this. And if we were immunocompromised, if we just were concerned about going down and being around people because of COVID, or if you're somebody who lives in Window Rock, or somebody who lives in Yuma, or somebody who doesn't have easy access to the Capitol, you could participate by talking like this. Well, if you go to the Get Involved page on the Democracy Pledge website, there's a little widget there that says, no, allow remote testimony. And I encourage you tonight, if you're taking the time to listen to this, go sign that Democracy Pledge. When you land at that Take Action page, take both of those actions, because it's critically important that they want to do this behind closed doors. They want to silence us. They hear about why these bills are bad. And if they don't have masking and they don't have COVID protocols, and there are people who are actively infected with COVID who are down at the legislature bragging about the fact that they're there, that's going to mean some subset of people aren't going to want to go there or feel comfortable or feel safe there. And remote testimony is a way that we can continue to participate if that's the way some of the people in the community are going to act. And take that action today, because that's going to get resolved in the next week or two. And either there's going to be remote testimony or there's not, and that's happening right now. Third, and they're not on the action page yet because we're not quite there yet, but as the session winds down, everyone's going to turn to election execution, election participation, and election protection. Election protection is our coalition's program to get folks at the polling places to be able to answer questions, point people in the right direction, provide information, make sure that the command center on election day and during the early voting period is informed if there are issues happening in the execution of the election. People are having problems actually casting their ballot. People are being harassed by protesters at a particular polling place, et cetera, et cetera. We're part of a coalition that has a whole process of election protection. As soon as the calls for volunteers go out, they'll be posted on that Get Involved page on the Democracy platform. But we encourage everyone to consider getting involved in the act of election protection. And then finally, get out the vote. It's like getting people to show up can overcome huge amounts of voter suppression efforts, okay? We've been successful keeping most of these bills from becoming law, but some of them are sneaking through. Last session, the Pebble Purge got through. The ban on private foundation funding, which means that there was something like 12 or 15 million last cycle that came into Arizona that went to election officials to help them set up drop boxes or go collect, pay overtime to go collect ballots from drop boxes or other things like that. That money's not here anymore, okay, because of this bill that was passed. And election officials are going to be struggling, and we need to do everything we can. We need to our local boards of supervisors and make sure that they're fully funding our election boards, and make sure that the money that was taken away because of this bad policy, this ban on private funding, that it's being restored. And we have the power to do that, because we need to get out the vote this fall, because we can overcome voter suppression at some level for some period of time by actually just turning out the people. Because when the people turn out, we get results that move us closer to a better democracy. And there's the URL for the Democracy Pledge, democracypledgeaz.com. I hope you've all done it, as I've been long-windedly droning on about it. So, Amanda.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Amanda. I was joined here today with Alex and Laura. We're from All Voting is Local Arizona. On the board right now is our website, our Facebook, our Twitter, Instagram, email address as well to get involved. Please sign our Democracy Pledge. We also have a college fellowship that we'll be launching in February. I'll drop the link to the application in that as well. It's a paid 7-week program. If you know any college students that are interested in learning about community organizing, we encourage students to apply to that as well. So thank you for spending this evening with us. Please sign the Democracy Pledge, and please take actions to help us protect democracy.
Well, thank you so much for that informative presentation. I'm seeing some comments in the chat. Yes, ISU Hillel will be a great place to get that internship out to. There is so much going on, and it is making my head spin. And I'm involved in this a lot as part of my paid job, not as much as you all are, but and so it's really hard to track. And I know that's probably intentional. And so I want to invite folks to, again, go ahead and lift their questions up either in Q&A or in the chat. Or if you want to ask the question yourself, please go ahead and raise your hand and we'll unmute you so you can ask that. But just to kick us off here with a question while folks are forming theirs, I'm wondering, as a faith leader, and I've been a congregational pastor before this job, you know, our voice is sacred, and the ability to express it is so essential to what we do and how we live out our values that are taught to us in our faith traditions. And just in my Christian tradition, all throughout the gospel, like we see people suppressing people's voices and Jesus going and lifting them up so that they're heard. And so this is very much sacred work that I believe we're called to do. And so last year, I'm wondering, what were some of the key strategies that were used to defeat the bills? Y'all talked about how we were able to defeat these bills. Well, how did we do it? How can we, and I don't want to out the strategies in a way that's going to hurt anything. But, you know, if I was just new to this work and thinking like, gosh, beyond signing the pledge, like, what can I do? How can the average person sitting anywhere in the state help play into those strategies that are successful?
I'll start, and others please jump in. I think that asking your elected representatives to be against these bad things, right? To acknowledge that these bills are harmful to democracy, asking your own legislators to be against them makes a big difference. You know, we are nonpartisan, but there are partisan divides in how people are approaching voting at this history, and there is active voter suppression going on, and but not everyone believes in that. And there are moderate Republicans who stood up and said no to unreasonable things last session. And that was the most important thing, to be quite frank, was moderate Republicans. I mean, if you look at what happened with the sham election review, you know, I don't always agree with advisors. I'm not sure I'll always agree with Recorder Richer, but they have done the right thing about this sham election review and basically stood up and said, we had a reasonable election, we had a reasonable process, we had checks and balances, the parties were involved, this is the outcome. We are not going to play this game that somehow says that this isn't real. Right? This is a real election. It was a fair election, and this is the result. And we're not going to do that. Having folks that are in the middle either way stand up and speak out and say that that this is bad and it's bad policy and we shouldn't support it makes a huge difference. Businesses spoke out last session. There were businesses that signed letters that, you know, through Leadership Phoenix and other places, business leaders came forward, and getting business leaders to say, this is bad for our community. This is bad for democracy. It's not about R's and D's. It's about democracy, you know, democracy as in our democracy, and that we're really undermining it. And so from my point of view, I think it's making the tent as broad as possible and making sure that folks that are moderate in the middle and sometimes maybe not politically active, standing up and saying, wow, this is really bad for our democracy. I don't believe in it, and I want you to take action. And the more we can get sort of silent voices in the middle to stand up and be counted, I think that it'll move things in the right direction. And I think that's where we had success last session, was when we could get a few moderate R's to basically say, this is bad policy, I'm not going to stand for it.
Yeah, Katie, I would love to add to this if that's okay. So thank you, Alex, for sharing all of those wonderful things that happened last year and how we were able to come together and where we're looking through this year. I would encourage anyone who's, a part of either Corazon Arizona or Arizona Faith Network, all of the networks and partners here, is to really check in with your local organizers. If you're watching on Facebook or just seeing this later, where is it the organization that speaks to your values, that is going to participate in protecting democracy and civic engagement along with their values in which that are speaking to you. And so I think that's the first thing is building a community. So that's how we will be able to move forward with abundance and dignity here in Arizona, is building a community, whether that's here in a virtual space with your local organizer, your local faith tradition, and understanding that we have power in our stories, power in our relationships with one another. And that as we, as people of faith that are watching this and participating, how is it that we want to show up as we think about changing the narrative of how folks of faith show up for our local communities? And that's when we think about how we serve and protect the poor, how we protect those at most at risk and vulnerable, right? And how we speak through what our actual faith tradition, whatever our faith tradition is, our values. And that's also by protecting our democracy. So I would encourage folks to engage, to go ahead and sign those petitions that they're sharing out. And then also I would encourage you all to connect with us as well at Corazon Arizona, join us online, Corazon Arizona, and get involved, right? So your tradition can be in partnership with these spaces. So building partnership and not just shunning away from folks. We need to be in dialogue. We need to be building bridges and having conversation with one another.
Thank you, Alicia. It's very true. And conversation with people who don't think the same way you do is so important. When we get in those echo chambers, it doesn't really move the needle, right? So there's so many questions, you all, in the chat and the Q&A. I think some of them might be fairly quick. One of them early on was, do you know the bill number for private company purge legislation? Is that out yet?
Oh, this session, it was HB 1819. It was the budget bill last time. I think it's 10:32. I'll look right now and I'll put it in the chat. I need to pull up my list. I think it's maybe 10:32. It's it's Senator Townsend's bill, and it's 10 something, and I'll find the number.
Well, in line with Senator Townsend, one of the questions in the Q&A is, what do you do when your state senator is Senator Townsend, when she's the one bringing forward most of these nasty bills we're seeing? Any advice on how to approach her?
I don't know. Do my partners want to jump in? I would say find neighbors that either voted for her or are of a persuasion that they might want to vote for her, and tell them why these are bad policies and have them go talk to her. She's hearing from a very vocal but actually quite small minority of her party, and is acting upon that because there's a national movement to do that. There's a national movement to deny elections and to try and overrule elections with untruths. And she's fallen in with that crowd, if you will, and having people in her district, businesses in her district, and other people in her district who might be inclined otherwise to vote for her, to say that that's really bad policy, I think is really good. I think also getting other people, I think getting anyone in her district to speak out to her is powerful, but the more that it's more moderate people and business owners and other people, I think the more powerful it is to try and move her to the degree she's been bought into this other mentality. It really isn't. It's a mentality. She's chosen to be there, but I think she could choose to be somewhere else.
And Senator Townsend listens to churches. She listens to places of worship. So if you speak on behalf of your places of worship, you will get her ear much more quickly. So this is a program for faith and voting rights. Think about how to energize your faith community to speak out on these issues.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for that. A couple questions, and I see Abe's question in the chat, and that's probably something we can do as a follow-up of getting a list of possible sympathetic AZ Republican reps. I think that would be a good idea, especially if we can figure out from a faith-based perspective some strategy around that. But I saw Christy lift up, who makes the decision whether testimony can be virtual? How does that play out in our state?
It's just rule. It's legislative rule. Oh, sorry, Laura, please.
Oh, I was going to say in the legislatures, both chambers, the Senate president and the Speaker of the House, those are sort of who quarterbacks what happens in each chamber. So that's a decision that they make pretty unilaterally. So sometimes you'll see split decisions. Like, for example, last year, the House gallery was open the House gallery was open, but the Senate gallery was not. And the reason that they gave was COVID, but you would expect that would be the same in both chambers. So it could vary by chamber, but it very much depends on Senator Karen Fann. She's the current Senate president, and then Representative Rusty Bowers. He's the current Speaker of the House.
And a follow-up question on that is, has there been any final ruling on that for this session that we know of?
They have articulated that there will not be public testimony, but
that's what I thought.
It's not final until there's not public testimony. I think there are people considering a lawsuit, and there may be a lawsuit, but that's never what we should be waiting for. I think the more people that go to that little widget and that widget contacts all the leadership of both chambers, the more people that go to that widget and contact the leadership and say, no, this is a bad policy, and people should be able to testify remotely, the more likely it is that that unilateral decision could change. It changed last session. Last session, they were not going to allow remote testimony, and then one chamber did, and then both chambers did. And it took a week or so before that all sorted out. They're pretty dug in right now, but things, stranger things have happened.
Yes. Marianne, I see your comment there in the Q&A. Just it is important to write to folks who stand up, especially people that are standing up as kind of a tie-breaking vote, and say thank you, and really creating those relationships, not just necessarily for a win on something, but having those relationships to remind folks that we're all human. Right? We are all human. We all have to live here together. Let's figure out how to do this in a way that values everyone. Some other questions. Let me drive down here. So one is, can we share the PowerPoint if we have your permission to send that out to everyone afterwards? Happy to do that. And a second question I have on my end is, if I want to bring all Voting is Local Arizona to share their presentation with my church, synagogue, or another group, how do I do that?
We are more than willing and able and excited to talk to anyone that's interested in voting rights, voting protection, getting geared up for the 2022 session and beyond. So I have my contact information in the chat. I could drop it in again. Alex, myself, and Laura are always available to be able to give presentations like this to more specific churches, congregations, community groups as well.
Awesome. Got about 3 questions left, friends. It's a toss-up of where we want to go first. So I'll go to the Q&A from Marianne and Jim. Hard to get in touch with elected representatives. Oh, it's hard to get in touch with elected representatives when no list of the legislatures with their phone numbers or emails is available. There is that. So we can definitely pull that if somebody wants to pull it and drop it in the chat. So that you have that. But from B, I do think this is an important question, is can you talk to us a little bit about the redistricting and how, if at all, that's going to impact anything this year?
Sorry. I'll start, but Laura, do you feel comfortable also addressing this? I mean, so redistricting matters. It's happening. It's happened. There might be some tweaks. There might be some lawsuits, but we probably know what we have. And I think that for the individual voter, it isn't, it doesn't sort of necessarily impact your experience of voting, but it might impact the power of your vote, right? That's what gerrymandering is. It's intentionally weakening the power of some communities' votes. Our process in Arizona is better than some other places, but it still has a long way to go to be truly and fairly democratic. And so I think, there are going to be, there will be fallout, if you will, from the redistricting process, and we just need to deal with it. It happens, and we just, we should make the mental note now. That's why the census matters. That's why next time redistricting has to even be more important. That's why we need to make sure the next time we go through redistricting, different people are in control of our legislature so that that process is actually managed in a different way. Different people are our governor. It's I hate to say change is incremental, but and I wish change wasn't always incremental, but we have to look at the long view, and the long view is that things will get better if we keep fighting, because the majority of people want to have a better and fairer government, and a government that's not just white men, to be quite frank. And we're moving in the right direction, but we're still a long way from that.
Yeah, and I can address that redistricting piece a little further. So the current makeup of the Arizona State Legislature is a very narrow split. So in the Senate, it's 16-14, and in the House of Representatives, it's 29-31. But you can imagine redistricting almost like taking all those representatives and just throwing it up like dice in the air and sort of seeing where they fall. We won't know until 2022 how all of that is going to shake out. There are many representatives who now find themselves in a district that would maybe be a little bit harder for them to win, others easier. So there will be a lot of changes. And that will be very interesting to see kind of the tone that each class of lawmakers brings. Some are more extreme, I would say, than others. But we're still waiting on how all that will shake out. And I agree with Alex that I think the maps are pretty well set. They were finalized on December 22nd. We're still waiting on some technical pieces. There may be some small changes, a couple of proposed lawsuits that may be coming on some of the more egregious districts. But from everything we're hearing, it's sort of, these are the maps that we'll run on. So we'll see what happens from there.
I have a question for the panelists. How do you keep up to date on all of this from local media? Is it Arizona Republic? Is it Arizona Capital Times? Arizona Mirror? What do you read every morning so that we can all be better informed of all of the issues?
Well, I'd like to highlight one of our partner organizations, if I could, which is Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. It's not necessarily a piece of media, but they put out each week the Legislature Weekly, which kind of goes through the bills that are moving through the chamber that week, tells you a little bit of information about them, and then offers a proposed support or oppose. Even though they are a nonpartisan organization, it's totally up to you. But that helps people stay very informed about specifically which bills are moving that week. And then if you use the Request to Speak program, that will eventually be, I believe, another activation on the Democracy Pledge website that Alex was mentioning. That's another way to make your voice heard at the legislature. It's a very unique system to Arizona called Request to Speak that allows you to comment directly on bills for both legislators to see. Those are oftentimes read into public record. The media will pick them up as well. So there are many different options to make your voice heard, but that's a great way to stay informed.
And it's a misnomer, because you don't have to speak. You can actually just type in your comments, right? And so you can go into Request to Speak, and if you've signed up, you can basically just comment on bills, basically thumbs up, thumbs down, and put in your statement there. And that's that's a very helpful and useful thing. And as Laura said, sometimes legislators will read the comments if they find them particularly compelling into the record. whatever. I have a Twitter feed that's it. I have my own curated, line of people that I'm sort of trying to pay attention to. I also read the Arizona Agenda, which is a new subscription newsletter. It's relatively inexpensive, but it also is like it's like good insider baseball as to what's happening at the Capitol and what's happening in politics in Arizona. And I read that also. And so that's how I curate my information. And then we have good partners that share. I mean, this is a really good community that shares information. And so if Civic Engagement Beyond Voting or All Voting is Local or somebody else hears about it, we have a coalition, a voting rights coalition of folks that are really fighting for fair policy down at the legislature, and you can join that coalition. And it's an active coalition that really focuses on trying to make sure that we have fair and meaningful and thoughtful legislation in Arizona.
So many great recommendations on what to follow. Paul is for sure a news junkie, so I'm getting articles from him like every day. So this is great, but I've just added some podcasts and everything else to my list to read. I wish we had more time to read. Great recommendations there. I did drop a link too for everyone that's on this call, and we'll send this out by newsletter too. If you're interested in getting involved in AFN's Faithful Voter working team, which is around protecting our right to vote from a faith-based perspective, we have a committee that meets. And so we definitely try to gather all the information that's out there and keep folks updated and do calls to actions there. So you can fill out that form. And you'll see the list of our other working teams too. If you have interest in any of those, please feel free to join those groups as well. And of course, Corazon is such an amazing partner. Alicia and I are going to be talking about bridging some of this work together and doing some actions together. So stay tuned for that as well. Can you say more, and I love this question because I have so many questions about this too, say more about the voter initiative that requires petition signatures. And I heard you all address that a little bit too, but the voter initiative that requires petition signatures, I want you to say a little bit more on that. And I'm not sure if there's more clarification you need on that question.
I do, because I'm not sure I understand the question.
Okay, so I'm not sure who asked that because it's pretty far back in the chat now. But if anyone did ask that question, please raise your hand and we'll get some clarification on there. But while we're waiting for that, just to make sure I heard right, were you saying that there's a potential where voters have to read out the ballot measure out loud? Can you repeat that one more time? Because I heard that and I didn't believe it was true when I heard it. So can you just repeat that one more time around ballot initiatives?
Sure. So there's a proposed piece of legislation, and Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, we've already seen this come back again this session. It's already been put through the hopper. If not, probably soon. But this would require, so citizens have the right at any point in Arizona to propose their own legislation. You just have to collect a certain percentage of signatures to do it. And that's based on, I believe, how many people cast a vote in the governor's race, the last statewide election. So it's a lot of signatures, well over 100,000. So to do that, you write your proposition and then you have that printed on a petition form and then voters sign that. So what this would change is anytime anyone is walking up to your table who's interested in signing, you as the petition circulator, you as a volunteer, anyone who's paid to do that would have to read the proposition to them for it to count. This brings up a lot of questions. So for example, let's say one person makes a complaint to the Secretary of State's office afterwards and says, well, I wasn't read the ballot petition, and they're able to go and look at that signature date and see, it was the same circulator, same day, same time. Does that invalidate the entire sheet of signatures then? How do you determine how those complaints are made? So it just brings up a lot of questions. And then it also begs the question of how much do we trust our voters? Because they would need to be read aloud the ballot proposition when they're signing it, but not when they see it on their ballot. I fail to see the difference between those two. So this just seems like a way to make it harder for people to collect signatures for these citizen initiatives.
Yeah, I think it's the summary, right? You don't have to read the whole initiative, but you have to read you have to read the whole summary. But like that's not the way people. It could take 2 minutes to read the whole summary, and like that's not the way circulators and petitions work, right? You're at the grocery store and people look at it, they know it. Oh, I know that. That's the education thing. I've been meaning to sign that. People should be able to just sign that. They shouldn't have to like listen to somebody read them the whole thing before they're allowed to sign it. It's paternalistic. Not only that, it's really designed to like make it harder to collect signatures because people, it's really designed to that. It's designed to just make the process harder, and it's already very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. As someone who signs those things, I could say that would be really a struggle when you're trying to move. So our last question, unless other folks have ones that will be dropped in the chat, is you mentioned considering research. What findings have affected your action program? So in your research, where have you pivoted in any of your advocacy or actions?
So I think we like to think of ourselves as data driven, and try and think through like putting ourselves in the places that matter, where we're really going to have the sort of the biggest impact. We're working with counties now on a county by county process where we identified a number of best practices that would make a noticeable difference. So one of the examples is, and again, these are like kind of in the weeds, but just to get the sense of it, is that if you go to vote and you're not registered to vote, you can say, I want to cast a provisional ballot, and they'll give you a provisional ballot. They have a duty under federal law to allow you to cast a provisional ballot. Well, some counties, one county has a process that's allowed by Arizona law that if you weren't registered, if the reason you had to cast a provisional ballot was that you actually weren't registered, their provisional ballot form has all of the questions to legally be considered a voter registration form. And so it's like a little mini automatic voter registration. You don't get registered for that election, but you get registered for the next election, right? So I try and vote and they say, no, you're not registered. But in that county, you automatically get registered for the next election because they collected all the information that was necessary. So we have a campaign where we looked at that'll affect 12,000 votes every time we vote. There are 12,000 people every year who are eligible to register to vote, but basically cast provisional ballots because they weren't registered. They didn't get registered in time. They didn't know they had to register. They just went to go vote. And they could have been people who would have been registered and automatically registered. And so this little thing, we realized, wow, that's 12,000 votes. If we could get all the counties or as many counties as possible to voluntarily adopt that practice, that's going to get 12,000 more people voting, right? And so that's the kind of thing. And we have a whole list of like county priorities that are based on that kind of data analysis that says like, okay, that's meaningful. That's worth fighting about. In Maricopa County, it's 7,500 people. They have to change their e-poll books, right? And so, they have to, because the provisional ballot forms are printed out of the e-poll books. And so they'll have to do some programming changes, but we've talked with them. They've committed to making those changes. They're in the process of making those changes so that next time when 7,500 people get that sad answer, at least they'll get registered to vote for the next election.
Excellent. We have one more question in the chat from Abe. Local Democratic groups have circulated mass petitions, example, education funding, repealing tax measures, to overturn those bills. Do you see this happening, and is it part of your strategy? So do you foresee any petitions?
So I think that we don't work generally directly on referenda or initiatives, although if the Fair Elections Initiative, which is specifically about voting and about the work that we do, that's core to what we do, gets on the ballot, we probably will work that particular initiative, even though generally we don't as an institution do them. It is so germane to what we do, we couldn't otherwise. I do think, so it's complicated and it's confusing for voters. It's not the best way to legislate, to have the legislature pass a bill and then have to like basically get a citizen override, because it's just confusing to people. And so like long term, I don't think that's the way we want to run our government. On the other hand, while we have people who are passing bad things all the time, I think it's a smart thing for us to do. And so I do think those things can matter. I do think they can get legs. I think that they also provide us a way to have a conversation. Like this next ballot is going to be full of democracy. Why is there so much democracy? Why is all this stuff on the ballot? Because there are people who are trying to actually prevent you from voting, okay? And if you don't want to ever vote again, then don't pay attention this year. But if you want to actually have a right to vote, then you should pay attention to all this stuff. And I do think there will be so much of it in 2022, just the sheer volume of it will allow us to convince voters that they should act. And that's what we really need to do.
So I've said this about 3 times, but last question, I promise. We, this coming Saturday, we are so excited to be graced by the presence of Martin Luther King Jr. III here in Phoenix, and we'll drop a link to that event. But the King family, as a lot of organizations here in Arizona, Corazon, AFN, have been calling for federal voting reform now for a while, until we're blue in the face. And really right now we're seeing the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act being called to be passed before we do any celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day. That's what MLK III has been saying, no celebration until there's legislation. We need to pass the Freedom to Vote Act. We need to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. I think I'm messing up the acronym there. And if those go through, praising all of that, if those pass on the federal level, how would that impact some of the stuff we're seeing here in Arizona? And I don't want to get too much down into the weeds of specific bills, but just a glimpse across, would that solve some of the problems we are facing here? Or are we still on our own with the fight?
So the way I like to describe them is just, the Freedom to Vote Act creates some bare basic minimum standards that states cannot go below, okay? And the fact that we have to celebrate getting bare minimum standards that states cannot go below is a sad commentary to the state of where our democracy is, but we will celebrate that. But that's what it is. They're bare minimum standards. So they help. In some ways, there's some good things there. Automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration. There's no reason those people who are eligible to vote and who were registered and could have been registered to vote shouldn't have been able to cast a ballot that counted and have to wait a turn. So yes, it matters, but it's sad how much it matters. The other thing is John Lewis bill largely just restores the Voting Rights Act to where it was in 2013 before the Supreme Court gutted it and basically said that states that discriminate should have to get permission to change their voting laws, right? So, these aren't like the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is like we're inching back into having real voting protections by doing these 2 pieces of legislation. They're not radical. They're basic minimums that we need to do to restore the health of our democracy, the minimums. And folks that are talking about them being radical don't know what they're talking about.
Very well put. Very well put. So see that as an action item. All that are still with us or watching this later, call Senator Sinema and call Senator Kelly. Make sure this gets through. And we know that opens the door into the filibuster conversation, but we're not going down that rabbit hole tonight. That's another day. Stay with us and get involved in other ways. Goodness, thank you so much, Alex and Laura and Amanda. You have been amazing and such a great brain trust around democracy and voting rights here. We will save these links. Yes, we'll do we call it our Quaker clap here. And we'll send all of these links and continue to invite our partners as to lift up the democracy pledge and to follow that. If you check the chat again, you'll see the information for this Saturday with the Deliver for Voting Rights. It's January 15th at 9 a.m., 15th Street in Jefferson. Our beloved partners at the African American Christian Clergy Coalition have been the key leaders on this, working with the King family, along with other partners that plan to show up and get the joy of hearing from a legend. Also, please go to Corazon, please go to Jewish Community Relations Council. If you're in Flagstaff, which I usually wish I was, but not right now because it sounds way too cold, please check out the Religious Society of Friends in Flagstaff. We're really grateful for our partners, and we will follow up with you by email. And once again, I'll drop as soon as I can find it, the link to get involved with our working team here at Arizona. Thank you, Paul, Alicia. Any closing comments? They're looking at me with scared eyes. So I think
No, just thank you for such a detailed information for all of us. And I look forward to our faith communities showing up in a large way as we protect our democracy.
absolutely.
I'm just gonna say amen.
Yeah, I like, and amen means may it be so. So whenever we close with that, we're really saying, bringing into existence what we are asking for. So with that, amen. Stay tuned for future ways to get involved. We'll do another advocacy legislative 101 training on the RTS system and all of that. Stay connected and have a wonderful evening, everyone. Blessings.